My name is James Moll, and I am the director and therapist for James Moll Counseling LLC here in St. Louis.
And what kind of what's your primary clientele?
My primary clientele is primarily involved with men or women who have been either charged or convicted of sexually offending against another.
And there's a great deal of controversy in terms of sex offender laws, sex offender treatment. What perspective you take after spending? How many years have you spent treating clients now?
I've been working with offenders now for about 8 to 10 years.
And what insights have you gained as to the best approach in terms of public safety and in terms of treatment of former offenders?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that some sort of ongoing treatment is absolutely necessary for the men that I work with. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. I use motivational interviewing. The track record research shows that group therapy, group treatment is the best mode for the folks that I work with, and so I do a lot of group work as well as the individual work with my guys. And actually, the reason why I do what I do is that I've kind of been overwhelmed by the kind of shifts or the changes or what has happened with the people that I work with in terms of moving from one place to another, in terms of their understanding, in terms of their personal growth, their awareness. So we work a lot on how folks think, why they think what they do, what their responses are to their thinking, how their emotions play a part in it. That's our primary work. Yes, we talk about sex offending. You have, on one hand, a concept of relapse prevention. In the early days, sex offender treatment was a spin-off, if you will, from addictions treatment, which focused on relapse prevention. I'm going to clip this real quick and say, so you did this, now you want to learn what you did and that you don't want to do it again, so now you have to learn a bunch of stuff so you don't do it again. That's how I would describe relapse prevention. So there's a whole series of kind of common approaches that let the people understand what their cycle is, what clear avoidance of any kind of denial and an acceptance of what they did, and learn what was involved in the kind of approaches that allowed them to do that. Finkelhor talks about a number of preconditions that set men and women up for sexually offending. So it's my task to get guys and women to see what those kind of preconditions were in their life that set them up to possibly offend, or now would set them up again to reoffend. But that's looking at it from one side. Now, my other concern is that I want to use some of the, if you will, some of the other more, not more modern, but some of the other techniques that focus on the future, so-called good lives models, self-regulation models. The theory here is that if I have a goal that says I want to have a healthy relationship, or if I want to have spirituality, or if I want to have knowledge in my life, then I set up a series of goals and objectives to reach that. And if my focus is on that, then I don't have to waste a lot of time on my past fantasies and that work in changing my brain process sets me up to be a much more productive human being. So I'm very happy with the kind of treatment models that are out there. I'm always looking for more and better and more powerful approaches. There's no question, again in my mind, that the laws the probation and parole stipulations can be helpful, but they're often sort of problematic. So I have to spend a lot of time dealing with my guys' worries. I mean, it's difficult to find a place to live. It's difficult to find a job. If they don't got any money and they don't have a place to live, you know, it's hard to start talking about theoretically going back to think about what's a part of your offending cycle. So if the efforts on the part of the community, as well as the efforts on the part of the professionals to kind of make rules and regulations and guidelines and stipulations apply to these men based on what I would call sort of a tier system that uses the greatest amount of energy on the people who sort of need the most kind of work. I think that would benefit not only my clients, but it would be beneficial to the community as well as all the professionals who are working in this area too.
Now, you said that you feel like that restrictions are helpful, but do you think there comes a tipping point when those restrictions can actually be counterproductive?
Well, I do. I mean, I think some of those restrictions, let's take a residency restriction, for instance. You know, in many areas, it's hard to find a residence that is not 1,000 feet, in, like, for instance, in the St. Louis area, from a school or a daycare center, a place that a guy could live and start kind of moving on his life. So he ends up perhaps spending more time in a halfway house or in a place where it's perhaps not a great place for him to live, but it's one of the few places that he can find. That is problematic. I do believe that you know, some of those kind of restrictions are problematic for our offenders because they still are involved in a bit of denial and they're still involved in a bit of self-victimization, and it's easy to, as they have done in the past, to blame others for their lack of responsibility. So yes, I do agree that those kinds of restrictions can often be problematic. One of my tasks is to try to search out what is laying deeper in my client to find out why his response to this is happening. Is it because of some of that denial or lack of responsibility, or is it really because he's being victimized? And in some cases, that is the case.
Do you think that the registry itself has a purpose?
Well, obviously the registry's purpose is to enable the community to protect themselves from these folks. My perspective is that in itself is not harmful. My perspective is that these are really not the people, the people I'm talking about here, the people on the registry are not really the people that are the most dangerous. The most dangerous, I think, are the people that have perhaps been offenders but have not been charged, or they are the ones that are not under supervision. They are the ones that are not involved in therapy. So, for instance, a common kind of stipulation or particular has to do oftentimes with Halloween. So my offenders have to take precautions to set themselves apart on Halloween, where actually, you know, if I was a parent, and I am, but I don't have kids who are still doing Halloween, I would be more concerned with some of the people who are sponsoring some of the smaller Halloween parties, you know, some of the others who have the potential to victimize, rather than people who are on the registry being supervised and in treatment. I think the real threat, if you will, is still somebody else that is not on the registry.
Depending on whose statistics you look at, there's somewhere between an 8 and 12% recidivism rate, somewhere in there, right?
Yes.
Would that be correct? And so that means that there's somewhere around 90% of offenses that are committed by first-time offenders? Yes, no?
Yes, I mean, quite honestly, I never thought about it exactly phrased that way. So your majority of offenses are being committed by first-time offenders, and in the same light, the concern about the recidivism rate, and as you say, you can look at it in different ways. If you're referring specifically to sexual offenses, yes, it is very low. If it has to do with other kinds of criminal activity, the recidivism rate goes up.
Right.
And of course, by offense, the recidivism rate goes from a very high one to a lower one. So it is a pretty mixed bag, but you're absolutely right. The concern for first-time offenses usually is outside of the people who would be on the registry.
So I guess my question to you as a therapist would be, wouldn't an effort, instead of all the concentrated effort on people that are currently on the registry or currently identified, wouldn't a concerted effort to reach out to people who may have the proclivity to offend but haven't yet offended be more productive?
No question that would be more productive, but as you probably know, prevention approaches are much more difficult to put into place because you don't know where to focus your attention.
Mm-hmm.
But those kind of prevention programs, and since most of the offenders are male, as we all know, good places to start would be in grade schools and in high schools, and particularly in all male boys' high schools, and even as we get into college fraternities and stuff. I mean, you have statistics like 1 in 5 women are going to be raped while they're going to college. We need to do some other kinds of prevention kind of activities to look at that. Now, what are we talking about? Yes, you want to talk about healthy sexuality, but I think we need to look at questions about male depression, adequately dealing with men who are involved with bipolar or manic depression. Those issues are very strongly involved in much offending. In the same way, pre-marriage or pre-relational kind of education, so that people kind of can learn how to communicate, would be other kinds of prevention measures that would be helpful. But they're hard to kind of focus, and we need to look for ways in which to make those focuses happen.
Do you think, though, that most parents would recognize how easy it might be for their kid to end up as a registered sex offender?
No. I think that kind of education for parents, again, and for teenagers or juveniles, whether it's in junior high or high school, is absolutely necessary. These men and women are able to not only address what happened into, say, any victim, but they're also probably in much better position than most of the people walking on the street to describe their thinking process, to be in touch with their emotions, and therefore be able to mediate and make decisions about how they will behave and act. These guys who have been in treatment for a while are just tremendous sources of strength and self-achievement, I think. There's a need to educate particularly young males about the areas that would set them up for preconditions. We have to be very much aware about the growth of juvenile sex offending, and hence be aware of, particularly with the increase of sexual abuse that goes towards our young males. This is clearly one of the things that sets them up for future deviant sexual activity. The need to talk about male depression and how we can work with men to recognize that they are able to be depressed and that something can be done about it. The ways that we work with men when they break up with their female partners or male partners or their wives. A specific kind of teaching and education and treatment for that. The need to educate parents about how their sons particularly could end up on a sex registry.